Roblox is planning to remove Gear. Between last RDC, when I gave a pitch for restoring Gear's platform use, and this RDC, when they said that they were getting ready for Gear to go, they've already taken steps to start phasing Gear out, like removing the indicators for which games players can use them in. But Roblox doesn't want to get rid of Gear. It's just the only solution they could think of for several problems on the platform, and they only had so much time to come up with strategies before they had to start acting on one. In theory, if there's a way to fit everything Roblox wants with Gear, they'll keep the system because it would be entirely an asset. And I've taken the time since my first pitch to focus on this one problem, with Roblox's feedback, which is why I'm now sure there's a way to save Gear that's even better for what Roblox wants to do and takes less work than the remaining steps to remove Gear from the platform. It's a simpler solution and shows how Gear can be a long-term benefit for every goal they have, but it just took longer to think through all the angles involved. So I want to start by going over Roblox's motives. They want to push the platform in a direction that follows three of their values, which they see Gear as an affordable sacrifice for, and the current Gear system as a hindrance to. The first value is optimization, because it's helpful if every core feature that exists across the entire platform is as useful and used as possible. The second is scalability, so that they won't have to worry about platform use or growth being held back by any manual or content limitations. Then the third is adaptability, so that as times change and different goals start to align, Roblox can make as many changes to as many parts of their platform in the future as they'd ever have a reason to. So Gear are clearly, regardless of the actual cause, being positioned against these three values. For optimization, anyone could have told for a decade that Gear would be abandoned by most games and then ignored by shoppers. Developers don't want to allow players to bring code into their experiences because they can't adapt that code to make sure it's compatible with their custom scripting. So now, the core marketplace dedicates an item classification and a labeled section to something that's barely used, when that space could be spent on more popular categories. Scalability can be very useful in areas like customer support, where it's beneficial when an employee can solve as many problems as possible with a single action. So it would be ideal to design an interface, service, and protocol so that whatever their finite employee labor is spent on can help with repeating problems in the future. But opposite that, the current system for Gear only allows Roblox, with their finite employee work power, to make the Gear themselves. And any sort of review system for UGC with code would require manual reviews for each upload, because any TOS violations would impact an indefinite number of experiences with no limit for intensity. In practice, that was the Gear creation process, because most Gear were made by volunteers and put through manual approval to get on the Roblox account. The system was set up in a different time, when Roblox ran on way less flexible programs and couldn't support nearly as many people as it does now. However, even though the replacements have been made to functionally cover everything the originals could do, some users became attached to those specific implementations because they associated them with the joys they found on the platform and imprinted those constraints as appeals themselves. Over time, Roblox's lack of transparency made it hard for users of any era to trust that the changes they could see had any solid plan behind them. And as this continued, it was easier for players to develop an opposing feeling against any changes whatsoever. Roblox knows this and wants to move away from anything that ends up being used as a platform for this opposition to fester. Because Gear are dead and only often used by retro enjoyers, they see the audience as similar enough to the one whose appeal they want to deny. But that doesn't mean Roblox thinks Gear actually represent any opposition to change. And if some change makes modern players interested in them again, then that connection will drop. And I have three reasons why, even before being sure of an alternative, it's good to consider the chance of an option that doesn't get rid of Gear like this. First, because removing Gear is still only one solution. Just because someone thought of it sooner, that doesn't mean a completely better answer can't exist. There could still be a quicker solution that still makes all of the problems of Gear go away. And even more hopefully, there might even be a solution that actually uses Gear to improve these desired qualities. Second, the pivot system doesn't fit in this case. Usually when Roblox wants to substitute a feature, they will make sure to introduce an alternative that covers all of the original's functionality and then some complements to the new feature that help transition the audience away from the old one. However, with Gear being a feature that doesn't matter to users anymore, the already complicatedly integrated system could just be minimally reworked to help Roblox pivot toward one of their goals through it. Third, Gear as a system still has core appeals that are not accommodated elsewhere, which is why it would be especially helpful if revived, even for prototyping or eventually merging into something else. So far, nothing else on the platform is in nearly as good a position or readily available as Gear to forge a connection between the marketplace and gameplay. The main appeals of Gear are that you can bring specific functionality you buy into an unlimited number of unrelated games and get an item accessory you can show with your profile. On top of already having the foundation for a feature with these appeals, shoppers have purchased gear for these benefits before, so there's a precedent for their value on the platform as long as a change gets developers to use them again for sustainable reasons and makes gear universally compatible for the platform's current and future progress. I don't think it's unreasonable to move on from an already minuscule audience you've still tried as hard as you can to transition. But there is a purely better answer that's quicker, more effective, and hurts nobody. 90% of the change would just be presentation, and no engineering is required for the minimal amount of employee effort that would get the top developers to include future-friendly gear in their front page and upcoming games. And I have a specific but adaptive timeline to show how this will work forever, with the only variation being in Roblox's hands. But so long as it's handled by Roblox, through the specific rollout I will mention, all the platform really has to do is treat Roblox Gear as communal game passes. Before the steps involved or the timeline to justify how this will play out, the core principle behind setting it up so that most developers include bonuses in their games for owning certain gear and common players regularly purchase them is to present gear in its own section of the marketplace as universal game passes you can buy that work across multiple popular and an indefinite amount of experiences. Frame them as providing consistent functionality but custom implementation between games, and the appeals to buyers for each gear will be that their behavior has a different spin depending on the title, as well as guaranteed benefits in several games. This can be achieved in a simple two-phase plan to initially create a wave of gear activity from both consumers and developers, and then establish an automated system that regularly produces waves of further purchases and development in major sustainable percentages of both the growing consumer and developer user bases. The goal of this plan would be to fix all of Gear's problems and make the remainder of the system worthwhile to the platform, which would be the case if it could keep developers interested in adding content for Gear, keep players interested in buying Gear, which would happen automatically from seeing all the games they can use them in, and have those two demographics then feed on each other's interests in response to regular, sparing instances of an automated and minimal third activity. This is what this solution accomplishes, reworking all of Gear's inflexible features into the platform's new and universal capabilities, and it requires even less effort from any actual Roblox employees. For the first phase, what's important is that before the moment where Gear are reframed as an effectively different idea while keeping the name to make use of the legacy, developers have the head start to get a pool of games ready. On Roblox's end, they only need to perform a handful of steps on their UI without having to touch their storage or the engine itself. They could start with the game display setting and dev forum announcement, then hype up the reinvention of Gear and prepare new category lists in the time leading up to the chosen date, and then provide all of the changes to players at once to help generate discourse among consumers and the largest wave possible. This launch is meant to align the activity of consumers into a wave that's more prominent, usable, and able to encourage trends in behavior. So, I would recommend including some buttons and icons to automatically show what games shoppers will be able to use Gear in. But most of Roblox's activity toward the change could just be promotion through blog posts, social media, and then some platform-wide announcements on the day of the launch. There's nothing they have to add to make Gear usable as game passes, because with the marketplace service, any developer can do this already. They only currently don't because there is no precedent, there is no new audience they'd gain, and there are no direct incentives. However, having a browsable category of games that can incorporate any specific gear would make current marketplace spenders want to buy it. So by having the dev forum coordinate this initial release ahead of time, probably also addressing the additional incentives, both the precedent and audience hurdles will be taken care of. Those differences alone would cause most developers to want to draw in these audiences of marketplace spenders and include moderate perks for Gear. Top developers would have opportunities to draw in wider audiences, and developers starting out would have more ways and angles to get out there, because the variety of gear that already exists allows developers to better customize and reach their audiences. Front page games can make the most of famous gear, and smaller games can reduce their competition through the greater number of niche gear categories. Developers can also pick gear that complement their specific games with alternative mechanics, moderate perks, or even just functionally using the gear as prop incorporating emotes. They could also tailor the selection of gear to fit a specific genre, style, or functional appeal. Implementing any gear will give a large number of marketplace spenders an incentive to play your game, and since developers can code gear to fit the ways they want and even use them as inspiration for content, most developers would find it worthwhile to incorporate at least a few. I asked one of the most unconventional developers I know what he thought about using gear as promotional game passes, and the only reason he doesn't do this already is because his next project is already focusing on something that's similar for a specific brand of classic shirts. If the number of gear a game can select at a time is capped at 3, developers would have no reason to remove their existing gear content, because it could still draw in new players with manual promotion. However, a higher standard of quality would automatically be enforced, the categories would be less cluttered, it would be easier for Roblox to set up the icon overlay, and developers would only cycle out which gear they officially feature, leading to more waves in specific gear popularity, and therefore further back-and-forth activity between the marketplace and mass experience development. The cap would also, and this would be a major developer incentive that does not cost Roblox anything, make it possible for developers to monetize their inclusion of gear. Like premium payouts or UGC limiteds, an accommodated portion of the currency spent to buy a gear could then be distributed between the games registered to implement it, based on how much activity they've received from users of the gear. The gear activity payouts could then just be set up to work with the same anti-fraud system used across the platform that briefly holds back any payments for automated checks and a user reporting period, because then it's simple, automated, and all in one place for future improvements. So, a majority of developers would be incentivized to incorporate gear, a majority of players would be incentivized to buy them, and the resulting shifts in gear preferences would cause frequent trends in marketplace spending and platform-wide development. However, monetization would also help how they thrive in Phase 2 for the long term. Once Phase 1 kicks off the initial interest in gear for the average consumer, new gear can regularly be released at a general pace that redirects more universal attention back to the marketplace and creates another wave of activity each time. The implementation of these gear is handled by developers, and even the uploading can be outsourced to independent partnership arrangements in the same way as emote batches. Developers would be waiting for the newest theme to capitalize on, and since consumers would know how valuable they will be, a massive wave of activity is guaranteed for each gear batch released, as long as they don't happen too often. So sustainably, but adaptively in case Roblox eventually reaches a point where they're ready to release a similar feature they can then merge gear into, gear will lead to regular boosts in platform-wide currency circulation and content development. While Roblox works on whatever functionally big changes they may have for the future, they can use gear to prepare and bridge the gap between the marketplace and gameplay now. This rework could be approved and then accomplished in no time because it requires no functional work, just a lot more time to establish the plan and effort to reach the people who might have become personally invested in the plan to wipe gear out. For Roblox as an overall platform, a potential pioneer for the next level of digital experience, and as a company, their current approach has a trade-off, and this solution purely has benefits. Roblox would be sacrificing nothing. It helps everything they want to do even more, and it only helps any changes they may want to make later. But what this means is that if there is a promotional push on Roblox's end, they can get rid of all of the problems of gear and reuse what's left over to make unprecedented progress in some of the biggest things they currently majorly care about. They would also give devs more tools to reliably grow audiences, a library of more communal models and designs to work with, and an incentive to keep working on their games, and it would create a positive and permanent platform-wide shift in financially rewarding activity. The power of marketing would have a night and day difference because of an untapped part of their existing structure of coded features, and it would be purely for the better. Roblox don't even want to get rid of gear, which they only planned to do because they had a limited time to come up with a way to solve those problems there is now a better solution for. So preserving gear, with a method easier than following the remaining steps for getting rid of them, would be a benefit and an asset for every reason Roblox wants to remove gear in the first place. And all they have to do is follow this minimal outline. I've spent a lot of time on this one problem to overcome the remaining challenge that the previous answer reduced it to. And after taking in feedback from Roblox employees and continuously reevaluating all of the factors involved, I am certain there is no reason for them to not go with this approach, as long as enough of the department heads are made aware of the actual details in this plan, because it's a better answer than their current answer for why they wanted to find one in the first place. It's easy, harmless, something that saves the stuff I like, and a way to get the ball rolling for the next stuff they want to do. So I really hope Roblox take this suggestion and just do it, assuming they or somebody with meeting calling privileges fully listens to it. But that is all for this advice. I will now get back to delivering gear reviews. Bye. By the way, they told me 2 RDCs ago that if I kept reviewing broken gear, they'd just take them off the platform. So if that's ever not their angle anymore, then I'll go back to covering and repairing the more broken stuff. But until then, it's only going to be functional requests and videos. Also, because of the trait removals, which now make it impossible for page viewers or games to check the genres and attributes of gear, my webpage section for reviews will be getting shorter. Although it also makes it easier for Roblox to switch to the individual selection system, so the change did help out this proposal. Angry also said that for including him in this video, he wants to ask if there's anyone who illustrates classic clothing and is interested in making a game together. If so, he said to message him on Discord at his handle, @QIBS, but I also set up a public channel so he doesn't have to deal with a bunch of friend requests. I don't use Discord though, so I will be taking mods from the comments section, and just join at your own risk. That is all for this for real. Bye.